My name is Autumn and I'm 34 years old. 3 years ago, my daughter Willow was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder that required an experimental treatment not covered by insurance. The cost was $82. I called my parents crying, begging for a loan, anything, even $10,000 to start. My father cleared his throat and said they simply couldn't spare a cent right now, that money was tight, that they had their own obligations. My mother added that family shouldn't put each other in awkward positions like this. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor after that call, phone still warm in my hand, staring at Willow's drawings taped to the fridge. 6 weeks later, my brother, Griffin, announced he was buying a house. A real house, 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, a yard big enough for a swing set he didn't even need yet since he had no kids. When I asked how he'd afforded the down payment, my mother beamed and said Mom and Dad had helped him out. A gift, nothing he had to pay back. The same month they told me they couldn't spare a cent. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse anyone. I just sat there doing math in my head, the kind of math that turns your stomach inside out. I tried everything after that. I sold my car. I took out a second loan against my house. I set up a fundraiser that raised $11,000 from strangers who didn't even know Willow's middle name. It wasn't enough. The treatment window closed before I could gather what she needed. Willow passed away for months after that phone call with my parents, for months after my brother signed the papers on his new house with the swing set in the yard. I stood at her funeral and watched my parents cry real tears, the kind that make you wonder how two things can exist in the same people at once. Grief for a child they let die and pride for a son they'd handed a house. For 3 years after that, I built a wall. I still went to holidays because I didn't want to give anyone the idea of saying I'd abandoned the family, but I kept everything at arm's length. Griffin, for his part, never once brought up the house or the money. He'd just talk about his new kitchen island or his home theater setup like none of it cost anything at all, like it hadn't cost me my daughter. I became a paralegal specializing in trust and estate law during that time, which is its own kind of irony given what came next. I learned how families protect assets, how they write people in and write people out, how a single clause in a document can decide who gets remembered and who gets forgotten. Last week, I got a call from my mother at 11 o'clock at night. Her voice was shaking in a way I hadn't heard since Willow's diagnosis. Griffin had collapsed at work, some kind of sudden organ failure the doctors were still trying to explain, and he'd been rushed to the hospital. He needed a transplant and fast, and the donor registry hadn't found a match. The doctor said a close biological relative gave the best odds. My mother's next words were the ones I'll never forget. You're his sister, Autumn. You're the only one who might match. I drove to the hospital that night, not because I forgave anything, but because some part of me still couldn't just do nothing while someone was dying, even him. The waiting room was exactly the kind of sterile blue-gray I remembered from Willow's last months, the same uncomfortable chairs, the same smell of hand sanitizer and fear. My mother was there, my father beside her looking smaller than I remembered. And when I walked in, my mother stood up so fast her purse fell off her lap. She crossed the room and grabbed both my hands, clasping them between hers like she was praying, tears already falling. Please, she said, you're the only one who can save him. You have to help. I looked at her hands wrapped around mine, the same hands that had once told me they couldn't spare a cent, and I thought about Willow's small fingers, how they'd gone cold in a hospital bed not unlike the one Griffin was probably lying in right now. I thought about the swing set nobody used. I thought about for months how close we'd been, how fraction of what they gave Griffin for a house would have bought my daughter more time, maybe enough time. I picked my bag up off the floor where I'd set it down, slung it over my shoulder, and I said one thing, just one sentence, calm, quiet, final. My mother's face changed instantly, the color draining out of it like I'd struck her. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor, and right at that moment, the doctor stepped out from behind the double doors, clipboard in hand, glancing between all of us with the practiced neutrality of someone who delivered 1,000 different kinds of bad news. He looked at me directly and asked, so, that's how the doctor stood there with his clipboard, waiting for me to finish the sentence he assumed I'd already started. So, that's a yes, you're willing to be tested as a donor. My mother's eyes were wide, hopeful, still clutching at the space where my hands had been a moment ago. I looked from the doctor to my father, then to my mother, and finally spoke the words I had carried with me since receiving the phone call. I'm not taking the compatibility test. I'm not volunteering to be a donor. I came here to see my brother because he's family. But I didn't come here to save him." The room instantly fell silent. It wasn't an ordinary silence. It was the kind that presses against your chest until breathing feels difficult. I'd only experienced something that heavy once before the day a specialist gently explained there were no more treatment options left for my daughter, Willow. That silence had shattered my world. This one simply confirmed what I had already known. My mother stared at me as though she couldn't understand the language I was speaking. Her lips trembled before she finally managed to whisper, "You can't possibly mean that." "I do. Autumn, he's your brother. He's running out of time." I nodded slowly. I know exactly what that looks like. My voice never rose. I didn't need to shout because the truth was painful enough on its own. I watched my child die while everyone in this family decided that another expense mattered more than giving her every possible chance. Neither of my parents interrupted. "I'm not trying to hurt Griffin because he's sick," I continued. "His illness isn't his fault, but being related by blood doesn't erase everything that happened 3 years ago. It doesn't erase the choices that were made." My father cleared his throat and stepped forward, adopting the calm, measured tone he always used whenever he wanted to sound reasonable. "Autumn, things weren't as simple as you're making them seem. We had responsibilities. There were financial commitments you didn't fully understand." I looked directly at him. "I understand money perfectly well," he continued anyway. "Helping Griffin buy his home wasn't meant as choosing him over Willow. It wasn't personal." I couldn't help letting out a quiet laugh, though there wasn't any humor in it. "If that's true, then answer one question." He remained silent. "One, I begged for help paying for my daughter's treatment. Why was I told there wasn't a single dollar available?" Neither of them spoke, but somehow there was enough money to give Griffin a down payment large enough for a beautiful 4-bedroom house with a backyard. Still nothing. No savings for a little girl's medical care. Plenty of savings for a house. The silence became their answer. The physician shifted awkwardly beside us. It was obvious he had expected a straightforward medical discussion, not years of buried heartbreak surfacing in a hospital hallway. "I'll give your family some privacy," he said softly before slipping back through the doors. As I turned to leave, my mother caught my wrist. Her grip wasn't painful, but it was desperate. "How can you be so cold?" she asked, tears running freely now. "How can you let anger destroy your family?" I gently removed her hand from my arm. "This isn't anger." She looked confused. "If I were acting out of hatred, I wouldn't have come at all." I looked toward Griffin's room. "I came because I wanted him to know I wasn't abandoning him as a person." I took a slow breath. "I'll sit in the waiting room. I'll talk to him if he wants me to. I'll be here while he's frightened." Then I shook my head. "But my body isn't something anyone gets to claim just because we're related." For the first time in years, I felt completely certain of where my boundaries were. My grief didn't disappear because someone else became sick. I continued, "The pain I carry doesn't become less important simply because everyone suddenly has another emergency to focus on." My parents had never truly acknowledged what losing Willow had done to me. Instead, they had expected time to smooth everything over. Time never did. A while later, Griffin's wife stepped quietly into the hallway. She looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes, and worry had settled into every expression on her face. Unlike my parents, she wasn't angry. She simply looked heartbroken. "I heard some of what happened," she said carefully. "I'm sorry." I nodded. She hesitated before asking, "Is there anything at all, that would make you reconsider?" There wasn't accusation in her voice, only hope that made answering even harder. "I wish I could tell you yes." She waited, but this stopped being about donor compatibility a long time ago. I folded my hands together. "It's about learning exactly where I stood in my own family." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. When Willow needed help, I discovered how easy it was for everyone to decide she could come second. Her eyes filled with tears. "I truly hope Griffin finds a donor," I said honestly. "No one deserves to lose someone they love. I wouldn't wish that pain on anybody." I paused, but wishing him well and feeling responsible for saving him aren't the same thing. For years I had confused love with obligation. I wasn't willing to do that anymore. Weeks passed. Eventually, the hospital found a compatible donor through the National Registry. Ironically, the match turned out to be a distant relative from my father's extended family, a cousin who barely knew any of us and had no knowledge of the years of resentment or betrayal. He simply happened to be the right match. The transplant went well. Griffin survived. When he was recovering, I visited him once. The room was quiet except for the soft rhythm of medical equipment. I pulled up a chair beside his bed. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I smiled. "I'm glad you're still here." He looked away before quietly saying, "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I should have said something years ago." His voice cracked. "When Mom and Dad gave me the money for the house, I knew what was happening." He closed his eyes. I knew Willow needed help. Another long silence. I kept telling myself it wasn't my decision. He shook his head, but staying silent made me part of it. Those words didn't erase the past. They couldn't bring Willow back. They couldn't undo the nights I spent praying for miracles that never came. But hearing someone finally admit the truth lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. For the first time since losing my daughter, someone inside my own family acknowledged that what happened wasn't just unfortunate, it was wrong. Today, my relationship with my parents barely exists. We exchange the occasional polite message. Birthdays pass. Holidays come and go. Their dining table has an empty chair where I once sat, and my own celebrations are quieter but far more peaceful. I've stopped chasing the family I kept hoping they would become. Acceptance didn't happen overnight. It took years. But eventually I understood that peace sometimes comes from letting go rather than holding on. Every month I visit Willow. I bring fresh flowers and sit beside her for a while. Sometimes I talk. Sometimes I simply sit in silence. Lately I've chosen bright yellow flowers because they remind me of the cheerful little houses she used to draw with blue windows and smiling suns overhead. She imagined homes filled with warmth, laughter, and people who protected one another. Those drawings now remind me that a real home isn't measured by square footage or property values. It's measured by love shown when love is expensive. Life has taught me that sharing DNA doesn't automatically create loyalty. Family isn't defined by birth certificates. It's defined by presence. It's the people who stay beside you when helping is inconvenient. The people who sacrifice without calculating what they'll lose. The people who choose compassion before comfort when my daughter needed them most. My parents revealed exactly where their priorities were. For years I kept hoping they would someday become different people. Eventually I accepted that waiting was only hurting me. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop expecting an apology that may never come. Sometimes strength is found in saying no after spending a lifetime believing you had no right to. And sometimes protecting your own peace isn't cruelty at all. It's survival. If this story touched your heart, made you reflect on forgiveness, loyalty, or the complicated reality of family relationships, consider subscribing and joining our community. We share honest stories about resilience, heartbreak, and hope, stories that remind us we aren't alone in the battles we quietly carry. Your support helps bring more real voices forward, one story at a time.